What's up, riders? Kevin
What's
Wilson
up,
with the BMXPERTS Podcast. Thank you very much, everybody, for stopping by. Thank you very much for supporting, subscribing, sharing the videos. Today, I have a reunification of some sorts. Two previous guests, Kent Lowry and Danny V, are on the show tonight. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Seattle scene back in the '80s and some of the things they want to talk about. And then we're going to start. Hopefully, we're going to have enough time to get around to talking about our picks for the most epic, legendary rider-owned BMX companies of all time. Gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining me on the show tonight.
Thank you. Yeah.
Nice, dude. So first off, you guys were training partners, friends, cohorts, partners in crime, all that good stuff, right?
Yep.
Who was faster?
Guilty, Your Honor. Yeah.
Nice, dude. That's good that you guys have come on. I've actually invited all my friends that I rode with back in the day, and no one is interested in coming on. So I think it's really cool that you guys have come on and share some stories and that type of thing. When did you guys meet? How did the bromance begin, guys?
Go ahead,
Well,
Kent.
I'll just say this. I think we were at Bike Factory. There was a bike shop in the Bellevue area, and we were both there for a purpose, to check out our dreams hanging on the walls in those bike shops, frames, wheels, everything you can think of. And we ended up meeting each other. He had a pretty nice bike, and it was better than what I was riding at the time. So I say, where do you ride? What's up? Who are you? And we just kind of went from there.
What I remember is him and his friend Chris were in the front parking lot doing those nose wheelies he talked about on the last episode, and I was pretty impressed with the balance. And when we walked in Bike Factory in Bellevue, it's like you're a kid in a candy store. It was like you guys, like, all the goodies, all the best bike parts were in there. The Rippers, JMC, Hutch, all red lines, Pit, what have you. The best stuff of its time. I was in heaven. I was like, I want all that stuff, but so yeah.
Nice, dude. So when you guys immediately started riding, or guys just hung out, or who's faster? What kind of trick? Just share some good stories, guys. I know you guys got all the stories you want to share.
Well, I guess we could take off on the endo. So Chris and I had some bikes that were kind of modified just for doing manuals in your front tire. And at the time, we could just, at any point in time, just pull up the back tire and roll a manual for about 20, 30, maybe 40 feet. And we would hit a curb, come up, basically get on a sidewalk, let the back tire hit the back of the curb on the way up. And then we had just popped this manual, and we could actually turn and make curves, and it was cool. No brakes, too, completely manual. And we had it down to where we didn't know. And so Dan was like, well, you'd never seen anything like that. And so it was just something we picked up, and it was unusual. I mean, you didn't see that kind of stuff. Very few people could do that unless they had brakes on the front of their bike, and even limited.
Well, so on that, I don't remember I would talk to you before, Kevin, about the track and Crossroads. I want Kent to talk about that, because I never would have went to that track without him, because him and his friends built it. I helped a little bit, and we had the neighborhood kids helping and stuff. But I want Kent to talk about that, because that's where, to me, like, dreams were made. We could practice. There were local pros, including Kent, that were there, and Bart McDaniel and Rob Potter and other people visited that track from all over the place. Really good riders. And Kent and his friends made some really, really good jumps. It was a really good track. But I want Kent to speak on that, because it led from the parking lot to that trail for me. And then everything
Certainly, I think me and Dan are unusual in that most people that ride BMX bikes dream of having some trails, and sometimes it's nothing more than just a few jumps. But in the back of this parking lot, where there was a church, there was some woods and some trails and some downhill, and it was just kind of a pathway through it. And somebody had originally started it. I didn't start it. Some other young kids in the neighborhood had started it. But since I had started getting into racing at 15, 16 years old, and it was only a mile from my house, we actually started building obstacles that would help us on the racetrack. So we'd make obstacles that were the hardest for us to deal with. So it would kind of like a really tall first jump, just like crazy tall, nice and steep on the backside. And we'd build the course for the primary purpose of improving our skills and improving our weak points. So we had, at the time we had a set of doubles that were like 23 feet across, and that was just enormous at that time. And then we also had a really nice berm and a jump in the berm, and we had a European corner that was pretty trick. And it started becoming popular. People from out of the area, from Canada, had kind of rumor gets around that there's some cool track around. Everybody started riding the track. We would see new people anytime there was a national in the area.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be bitching.
Hey, also for what Kent's saying, the track, I want Kent to explain. There was a jump we named after Bart McDaniel, who was a very stylish rider. He was a very fast pro, like a spinner. He had a small front gear, I think. But we named a jump after him, and we had to put a pad on the tree. I want Kent to explain that one.
Yeah, the memories are starting to come back. I remember
the Bart lip.
Yeah, we had this. You had to jump a set of doubles and then hit this ravine that wasn't really deep, and you'd come up to it. And he built this jump that was probably no wider than a chair, and you would hit that, and we had a tree that was right next to the landing, which made you land inside of a big double. So basically it was a side jump just before a set of doubles. So you'd hit that, and guys would get as high as they could on the side of that tree and try to pick the high mark, see who had the highest mark on the side of the tree. Just touch it with your back tire and then drop it down in. It was pretty cool.
But you guys you put a pad on the tree because like guys were bending rims on it or something. I think I crashed into that tree at one point.
Well, it's really a fascinating story because originally that piece of land was donated by the neighbor across the street. They had a lot of acreage, and so they donated that piece of land. And I don't remember how many acres it was. I want to say it was two or three odd-shaped acres. And the old guy that had donated this property just wanted to make sure nobody got hurt. So he put a big, I don't know what it was, a big thick piece of foam. But, and also on the tops of these big doubles, we got tired of people casing and kids riding over and scratching down the top of the lip. So we actually had big logs on the top of those doubles on each takeoff and landing. So if you tagged, you were going to pay for that in a bent rim.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, that was intimidating. I got over some fear. Jumping it from the top half down was a little easier, but Kent and me made the newspaper that I think he might be able to send you a copy of a local Bellevue or Seattle newspaper that took a picture of both of us wing abreast about, I don't know, 8 or over man height, maybe 8 feet in the air, going backwards up the hill over the doubles. It was pretty cool. So Kent's got that picture. So. That
was the Journal American, and it was actually an article kind of near the last couple of years of that track's history because the city was wanting to relocate the track to another location, but none of the local writers wanted to deal with that. But we actually ended up losing that track. You know what happens to most people that have BMX tracks in the backwoods. Eventually they get bulldozed, but we had that track for probably, 8-9 years at least.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It was awesome. It was so cool. It was like an escape. It was a training camp. It was like school's always in session there. There was always something to learn. And it was fun too. It was fun practicing. There was some jumps had sketchy landings. Some had safe landings. He put a jump in the middle in the center of the track where you could practice table topping. It was like a dirt half pipe just about. Remember that, Kent? did 360s off them. It was so cool. I remember those.
Yeah, those we had a set of 20-foot doubles, a set of 22-footers, or maybe they were 23. And then we had a step up, a small set of doubles, a big bull berm that was so steep you could just rail it really fast with a jump right in the middle. Yeah, it was live. We had riders from Canada there. Amazingly, nobody actually got hurt on that track. It was pretty crazy, but I mean, nothing more than a few abrasions, but we never had any epic injuries, which was probably a miracle.
that was amazing, because there was some pretty technical for our time for what we were doing. There's pretty technical jumps, and I mean, you really had to have it wired to ride that track well. I like that part. He made it difficult.
So I have something that might bring a little fascination to this little discussion we're having here. In the early 80s, if you have any really early 80s BMX magazines, or like the ABA paper that would give you your point standings, the tracks were really basic. You went down the straightaway, there was one roller in the first straightaway, then you had a berm, you come around the corner, there might be a set of doubles or just a couple rollers that are so far apart you're not going to jump them. Then you have one more corner and a last straightaway that may not have any jumps at all. So it was pretty much a drag race. You know, it was an athletic challenge at that point. But once we started getting a lot more complicated obstacles, then it turned into kind of a talent show. I mean, you really had to know how to ride those obstacles. You would have riders that were really fast. Like, anybody who is familiar with the name Clarence Perry, if there wasn't a lot of difficult obstacles on the track, you know who was going to win the national. It was going to be Clarence, because he had the horsepower.
He was terribly powerful.
As soon as those obstacles started getting a lot more complicated, and he could jump, he jumped pretty good. But all of us can relate to the fact that there were some times where tracks had jumps that were so sophisticated, at least to tackle at pro speed, that it challenged even the best riders. And so one of our goals at this track was to make some really difficult obstacles so that when we went to a national, there wasn't anything that was out of our league. We were already familiar with it.
You know what I dig about you guys? Both of you guys are very intellectual, and you guys are very methodical on your thinking about how you approach your riding. With myself and my crew, we were not intellectual. We were just flat out as fast as you can, jump as high as we could. No training, no thought behind. We had no thought behind what we were doing. We were just riding. And I dig you guys because both you guys are so intellectual about your approach to riding. The theories and the methods that you guys use. That's great, man. I can appreciate that now.
Kevin,
I actually don't think me and Dan are alone at that. But anybody who's on the regular national circuit, they're on their bike, at least 2 times a month. That makes me think of another thing. If you look at your older ABA magazines, or paper as it was in the day, there was only like about 10. I mean, one of your viewers might, agree with me on this or confirm it, but there was only about 10 nationals for the whole year. And that wasn't a lot of races. Then pretty soon it got up to like 20 nationals in a year. And so you had to make every one of those nationals. And so then it ended up becoming a financial challenge to be able to make them all. And then if I'm correct, the ABA started to make it where you didn't have to make every single national to determine whether or not you'd be, #1 amateur or #1 pro, but they kind of took just the best scores out of a percentage of those nationals, and then that would determine your overall rating. That's kind of how I remember it.
Yeah, I only raced one national my whole life. Oh no, in the United States I did.
Yeah,
nice, dude. What about you, Danny? You feel the same way? I mean, were you on the national circuit as much as Kent was? Did you guys travel together, or were you more of a local guy?
I was strictly a local guy. Now, I did go to Clackamas and Eugene once for a race with some friends. I don't know if Kent went on that trip, but friends from the area. We drove down there. But I was basically a local guy. Kent was more, as you heard in his episode, they traveled most of the country. I was just a middle of the pack guy, and happy to be there. I was happy like we said, not to be too esoteric, but a lot of what we're talking about spread into current sports in my time in life now, like the paddle surfing and, other endeavors. The BMX was like my original balance device. It led to a lot of other things. And Kent too, he's involved in athletics, water sports, and, stuff up in Washington State. But I can speak that, for me, the BMX, like, it led to a lot of different things, Kevin. So I'm grateful for those times for sure. And it's awesome talking with you guys about it. So honored, Yeah.
So, hey, I wanted to mention something. I'm going to
nice.
throw out.
Are you guys the same age?
Seen show up at some of our tracks. And I'm going to mention this. We had a track in Redmond. Here's what would happen. One would get bulldozed for whatever reason. Kids making too much noise, or somebody sees that there's these big jumps and we're doing crazy stuff on our bikes, and somebody gets concerned someone's going to get hurt. The next thing you know, it's you find out your track's been bulldozed. So we had a track on Northeast 8th in Northrop in Bellevue. I'm going to say it was east of Crossroads. And then we had another one in Bellevue, which was, I'll use Sears as a landmark when it was there. And some of the riders that would show up to these tracks, I remember one time Jack Hutton showed up at one of these trails that we had, and he was like #1 pro in Canada. Pete Zablotny had showed up. Obviously, we had some of the local guys like Scott Matchell. There was James Allen. Some people might remember these names. We had, of course, me, Dan, Chris. I'm sure Bart McDaniels, Rob Potter. Who never showed up at our trails as far as I can remember?
You guys have mentioned Rob Potter a couple times. Who did he ride for?
GT.
Okay, he was on Factory GT, or he was support?
Well, I don't know. Kent might know. I thought it was like a partial sponsorship. I don't know if he was the full ride. I don't know. Kent might know.
I can't remember. I want to say that I've seen YouTube videos of where they're talking about who's in first and second, and Rob Potter's name came up. So I don't know, funny, considering we had 3 significant tracks. Actually, we had 4 at one time since I raced bikes, and we had significant jumps on every one of these tracks. But I want to say that Gary Ellis never came out. I always thought someday that guy might show up at one of our trails, but I think he rode his bike so often. I know he had his own trails in his neck of the woods too. But
hey, there's something else I forgot about, Kent. You might have done this too. I remember this was right around the time we were getting our licenses and learning to drive. This is right in that time. Yeah. Well, I told you about my pizza job and all that, but metal. But I remember going to SeaTac and Bothell when they were closed and just parking outside the park and riding the track, even though the gate wasn't operational because no one was there. And there was always a few kids and their parents out there riding. So I do that too. A couple times. I remember the SeaTac. I like that one, the downhill. That was a fun one. But yeah.
Any local BMXer can remember getting in their car as soon as they had a driver's license, and you learn about where all the trails are. And if you didn't have any big race in the area, what you do is you'd make a bunch of phone calls to all your friends, and you'd just kind of go on tour and hit about 6, maybe 7 or 8 tracks and spend the whole Saturday going to track after track after track. And these aren't sanctioned BMX tracks. These are just people's backyard trails. And some of them are pretty epic. I mean, there was a few tracks, where you kind of wanted to see somebody go through it first before you attempted, because you could really bang yourself up.
Yeah, I've shared this story a couple of times where our crew, we thought we were building jumps and we thought we were building berms, but we were building berms that were like 2 feet high, you know, and little teeny things. And we were building bigger jumps, but we thought we were the shit. Like, you know, we thought we were building tracks until the one time that I finally saw a real BMX track for the first time. And I was just like, my eyes were like, oh my God, this is Nirvana, man. This is so bitching. So we were using shovels. So I can imagine how much work and toil and all it takes to build these damn huge berms and huge tracks and all that good stuff.
Well, I can remember, I never forgot this. This lady walking through the neighborhood with her dog decided to find out what's all this noise in the woods. And she comes through there and she sees about eight teenagers with shovels and picks and wheelbarrows going around, and just, we always refer to it as stacking it up. And people were like, when they come back, they're like, did you guys like rent a backhoe to do all this? And we're like, no, this is about 8 guys busting their butt, building jumps. I mean, it actually gave us some fitness.
Absolutely.
You got really strong.
In a way, we weren't. If you go to Iowa, some of the best Division I wrestlers come out of Iowa, because they're all farm boys. They're on the farm all day baling hay. Their hands are grabbing heavy stuff and moving it. So we were Seattle boys. We didn't have that, but we were moving wheelbarrows, moving dirt, helping build. I mean, it was our way. So even as a kid, even though I didn't like doing yard work at home, having to mow the lawn or paint something, whatever else.
You'll dig.
I do that for free all day, helping kids and those guys, you know. And it was a workout too, you know. Even riding to the track and back home, you know. So we were always training. We were always in motion. I never forgot that, and I still do that, you know. I know he does.
Speaking of that, this lady, when she saw this, she saw how much work we got done, and she wanted to hire some of us to work on her yard. So we saw how hard we could work.
There you go. Yeah.
Dude, we'll work for bike parks, man.
Yeah. They were like upset after they saw how much dirt we could move.
Yeah. That was good. Hey,
man, you know, the best. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kevin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The best tool, everybody wanted the flat shovel.
Oh, yeah. The flat shovel. It packs the best. You just kind of take the shovel, smack it on the back of the jump. And as you smack it, you slide down. And then once you've got it completely groomed with your shovel, then you take your bike and you go up it about 60 times to just over every track. And then everybody, of course, you got this brand new jump and everybody's trying to get the nerve up to go for this set of doubles.
Yeah.
And, you know, the very first time you air it, you know, it always feels like you might wreck. You're all sketchy and squirrely and you save it, just barely save it. And you're like, okay, now I got it. I know what to do.
Yeah, the jump's all soft. Yeah. We always fought over the flat shovel. Everyone wanted to groom the face of the jump. So in our area, you guys mentioned that, you know, all these pros, all these really fast guys and these cal guys, it was like the place to go. In our city, we had Garfield Park, and some of my childhood friends watch my videos and they'll relate to this, but we had Garfield Park and named
Garfield Park.
That big hill. You come down this huge hill, and we built a jump on the other side of the lip, on the other side of this little cove.
Mm-hmm.
But we one trash can laying down, and then we'd move it out a little bit.
Huh.
Wow.
More, we jump it again, and then we started getting trash cans from all over the park. We did one trash can, two trash cans. So after, like, you know, one summer we were doing like 6 trash.
That's a pretty big set of doubles.
You know what? Let's stand them up. Yeah. It wasn't. It was jump the flat.
Jump to flat.
That's pretty.
So we kicked them standing up. So then we got the 6 standing up, and then we're like, so we all carried this pick across the park, put it in front of the jump the picnic table short ways, and then we go, let's turn it long ways. So at the end of the story, the really good guys in my picnic table shirtwaist on the back of it to flat. That was our, and then, we put a trash can on top, can over another picnic table to flat. And that was our big jump.
Gnarly.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm remembering something. I'm trying to segue Kent into that hill ride
because of
the flats.
Yes.
Kent's got a story for you, Kevin, that you might be interested in.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that at the last podcast.
Yeah. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I guess, so we had a bunch of different trails and a bunch of different jumps and all different kinds of stuff we did. But one of the things that we wanted to do was build our endurance. So one of the things me and Dan would do is we had this pretty significant ride. You'd only want to do it once in a day because you'd be too wore out to do it twice. And so we would start at the bottom of the hill at his place. And I don't know how many miles it was, but all I know is it took, I think, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but didn't it take about an hour and 15 minutes to make it to the top?
Probably. That's reasonable because we went up. I lived in an area called Somerset on the backside, 130th Avenue. This is a service street in Bellevue at the bottom of this mountain called Somerset. And people of Bellevue know this well. It's a house full of, it's a hill full of houses. And the higher up you go in the strata, the more nice the homes are. But at the top of that mountain, there was a couple schools. And then we went down the backside of it. And a lot of the Supersonics lived up there. Seattle Supersonics. We used to deliver papers to them. But anyway, going down the backside of the mountain led up to another mountain called the Summit. And the top of that hill was Street of Dreams. And this is where me and Kent I had some endurance contests with him. And where it was kind of man against himself, just make it remember, switch back up that thing and stay on the bike at all costs. Don't get off and push it. You ride that thing to the top no matter what. I remember that a lot.
No
go
question.
Ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
You can't get off the bike. Yeah. Well, what I had for a bike, so I wanted to strengthen my legs. So I had a set of Ashtabulas on this bike, but they were just basic stock Ashtabulas 192s. But I just want to talk about the bike I trained on because it wasn't my race bike. I mean, most guys that are really serious in their racing have more than one bike. One that's kind of their thrash bike. So if something happens, they're not tearing up your good bike. But my beater bike was basically a set of top wheels with two 125 tires on it. So they're a little bit bigger. I ran a 52. I'm not kidding. 52-16. 52 on the front, 16 in the back. Remember that, Dan?
Yeah, that was a tall gear. I don't know how you did it except for the longer crank. I mean,
even with the longer crank.
I'm going to follow this, Kevin. We'll talk about this later, but Kent's crank story is amazing. But I have a question, and it's sort of a math problem. I want to see if we can solve it. But continue, Kent, about that ride that day. What happened? So
I remember that the 52-16 was kind of cool to ride on because you got used to riding that thing. It was just so heavy, so hard to crank. And then when you go to the racetrack and you got on your race bike, you felt so fast. You got off a bicycle that weighed, my bike weighed around, my beater that I trained on weighed about 31 pounds, 28 to 31 pounds. Had a set of tough wheels front and back, the heavy ones, not graphite, two 125s front and back. Then I used thornless tubes on the front and the back, thorn-proof tubes. So those things are just like almost as thick as the tire themselves. And then anytime I could find a part that was heavier, I'd swap it out and put it on this bike. The goal was to get this bike as heavy as I could. And it was a mongoose with some heavy Ashtabula forks on it that were probably the heaviest fork that would be on a bike. That would be 20-inch. So anyhow, there was this epic day that me and Dan went up to the top. By the way, my bike had front brakes, rear brakes, and also it did not have a freewheel on the back. So you know how those are. You just crank back a little ways and your rear drum brake comes on. So that was heavy. That's what I wanted. So we would ride up to the top of this
rear
mountain.
brakes and coaster brake.
Coaster brake, yeah. I don't know why I said drum.
Okay,
Well, it is
right.
drum.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, it's a coaster brake. Basically a drum in the hub. And so there was a day that was pretty spooky because me and Dan had managed to get to the top of the hill. And I always, since I had 3 sets of brakes, I had plenty of braking power at the bottom of this hill. I mean, the hill on this course that we would take was extremely steep. I mean, I'm sure all of us had had a chance to ride a hill that is so steep that you just have to switch back and forth. Otherwise, you're not going to make it up. And I think, yeah, I didn't always run that 52.2 sprocket. It was fine on the flats, but most of the time I just ran a 48 on the front, 48 in the front and a 16 in the back, or a 15, because I had a snap ring rear cog. And so me and Dan were at the top of this hill. We'd usually hang out, look at the view, because it's an incredible view up there, 360-degree view, especially if it's starting to get dusk. But this particular day, it was the middle of the afternoon. I think it was probably a weekend, and there was no race going on. And so we had a pretty good close call, I think. So we started down this hill. And so we're at the top. Me and Dan are cranking as hard as we can. As soon as your gear runs out, you just get into a tuck as tiny as you can and try to have the least amount of wind resistance and get going as fast as you can. The hill was steep enough that without question, 45 to 50 miles an hour, you could easily accomplish that on your BMX bike. No problem. If you got a bug in the face, it hurt. If it was a bumblebee or something like that and hit in the face, it stung. That's how fast we were going. And I remember
your lips are flapping. Your hat.
Oh yeah, and you got to close your eyes down because the water is coming off the side of your face. You're going so fast. And so at the bottom of the hill, it flattens out. There's a gate guard, kind of a tower there that the guy,
like a shack in the middle. Yeah. Yeah.
Make sure that you're not just roaming the neighborhoods, casing the place. And so I remember I would always lead because I had the brakes, and I would always, Dan had a lighter bike. He'd take off faster. I'd draft behind him like motorcycle racing. Then I'd come out around him, and then I'd pass him. And then, of course, since I had so much braking power, I could stop. Well, this one time, this is epic, guys. So we're approaching the bottom of this hill. There's a 90-degree turn. It's pretty much a hard 90. I mean, you're at the end of the hill we're on I'm going to call it a highway, but there's no traffic comes from the left. It only comes from the right because it's kind of just a turnaround place maybe for an 18-wheeler or something. So we're approaching the bottom of the hill, and Danny just goes blowing by me. And I'm like, no way, you're not going to be able to stop. And so I'm following him, and I could actually smell, get this, Kevin, I smell his brake pads melting on his bike. And so I'm thinking that's why he passed me. His brakes are really hot. So I'm waiting for Danny to put both of his feet down to try to slow himself down to the corner. So what does he do? He leans the thing over like a crotch rocket and just slides all the way across the intersection into the gravel. And I actually saw his brake pad come off his bike. Like one side got hot enough, it came off and just dismounted from his from
the Mathhauser.
It must have been a Mathhauser. Yeah. He slides off in the bushes. There could have been a car coming. I'm grateful there wasn't. And he goes right across, pedals grinding across the pavement. He's laying it down like he's done this many times before. Goes right into the bushes and vanishes. I didn't even know if there was a drop off on the other side.
Nor did I. And the other thing, Kent, the other thing is that road, Street of Dreams and Summit was a brand new neighborhood. All the houses at the top, when we were climbing it, and we went up it many times. I mean, we went up that hill at least 10 times since we trained together. But that was not a complete neighborhood. It was still under construction. And the road leading up to Summit, the one he just said that when we went to the bottom past the guard shack, and luckily there was no security arm either, that wasn't in place. So there was a bunch of like lucky things that I passed. There was no gate arm. There was no guard out there. There was no oncoming traffic either way. And the road was so fresh that it wasn't even paved with lines in it. It was just black tar. It looked like a 1-lane logging truck road. So I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I lost one of my 9 lives that day. And I vaguely remember from Kent saying all this, that I skidded. You'd think I would skid since it was a right turn with my right foot out in the bike lane, but I was the other way. And I went right off into the brush, which went down an embankment a little bit.
Well,
I remember being scratched up a little bit, but not too bad,
Well, when
I was lucky, man. Lucky.
He ground off enough aluminum on his pedal that he lost the little plastic seal on the inside, so you can see the inside of his bearings.
Oh, that's right. That was a Shimano DX before I had the hutch. The hutch would have been sparking. I could have started a fire with that. I mean, yeah, it was the DX, the thick one with the pegs in them. Yeah.
Well, when I just remember, I was like, well, it looks like Danny's going to win the corner today, and then I could smell you as soon as you got in front of me. I could smell your pads. Like, yeah.
Kent, you remind me of something we did going up Somerset, because Somerset, Kevin, was the hill before the summit, and that's the one we regularly went up. We could go up and down that one a few times a day if it wasn't too hot and we stayed hydrated, but it was still a steep climb, but it was less than Summit. The closest I can explain Summit is like Lombard Street in San Francisco, known as the steepest street with its switchbacks. The Summit was like a San Fran skateboard street for sure.
It was so steep.
So steep, man. Yeah. But
steep,
Somerset actually wasn't that bad, but you never saw kids riding. We were like probably one, unless there was an old guy on a 10-speed or, something, but we rode that hill all the time. I lived right behind it. So whenever Kent came over, we rode it for sure.
I just remember that my calves were on fire, man. My thighs were just burning. That was such a workout.
You keep going, Kent. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was epic.
I don't remember having too many epic crashes, but I do have I remember you talked last time Kevin interviewed you about getting the wind knocked out of you. And I remember as a kid running through a neighbor's yard and tripping over some garden wire, and I fell down, and that was my first sensation of but on a bike, I fell at Sumner River Valley BMX off a tabletop. I wasn't going fast. It was during practice, not even a moto. And I remember falling, like I was attempting to jump the tabletop, and about 3/4 over in the air, which was only a couple feet in the air, mind you. It wasn't an epic attempt. It was just me trying to get from A to B. But I fell off the bike over the bars, and my chest, wearing a T-shirt and then my jersey, was the only thing protecting it. I hit on the downside of the tabletop, and what came out of my mouth was home. Like I wanted to go home. That was that's how shocked it hit me. It's like, that was all I just wanted to go home, dude. So I'll never forget that one. Yeah.
I mean, nobody likes.
I always leave after the pain. Yeah. After the pain leaves, I just go, dude, just leave me alone. I want to go to sleep.
Yeah, you need some space. That's it.
Well, one of the other things about that ride that me and Danny would do is there was a lot of downhill, curvy streets, and it was like you were on a crotch rocket, but you're on your bicycle. And it was a challenge. One of the challenges that I always had is, can I make it all the way down and not use my brakes? And then we prefer to do that ride around dusk, or just about when it was dark, so we could see headlights coming, and you'd know if you could cut the corner or if a car was coming. And that was
Kevin, let me interject real quick on what you just said about your brakes. And I forgot about this because I segued into losing my air. But when we went down Somerset a few times, Kent, you would literally unscrew your brakes so they wouldn't like fully lock. And at the bottom of Somerset, at the fountains by the junior high school, it would dip and go back up. So you could, if without any brakes, you could slow yourself down if you went full speed. You wouldn't just stop into so you had that ability. If presuming nothing was in the way, we were dealing with that.
Well, that's why we did it. That's why we did it.
That was crazy. You purposely undid your brakes. I was like, what are you doing, man? But I don't think you totally undid them all the way, but unless you were messing with me. But it looked like you you were making your brakes non-functional or something.
Well, did you guys push your seats down so you're lower, or did you keep them all the way up race height?
I had mine mid-height. I don't know. I just had mine mid-height. I didn't have quick release. So
again, this is just my practice training bike that's all heavy. So the seat was kind of like midway, not good enough for tucking a tall double, but it was okay. But I do remember something that was pretty spooky. I don't know, Kevin, if you've ever gone down a hill with a coaster brake on your bike where you're going so fast that if you start to engage your coaster brake, on my bike at least, if I was doing about 40, close to 50 miles an hour, you put the brake on, the hub would get hot, and all of a sudden it would just lock up on you.
No, I never happened.
There may have been something wrong with my rear coaster brake, but that thing got hot enough one time. I mean, you don't really want to lock up a bicycle wheel going that fast, because as soon as it happens, I remember the first time it happened to me, it was like speed wobbles on a BMX bike. It took everything I could to get that thing under control once it locked up like that, especially if you're in a corner, because if you're going really fast, you don't want to have to put your foot down in a power slide at 45 miles an hour. It's not going to be good.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
Going down Summit was close for me with that. Like, I never really had death wobbles on a BMX, but as close to those as I did have would be going down that hill and making those turns. I can't believe we even did that, man. I mean, thinking about it now, man.
I do remember this. If both valve stems were in sync with each other, you got going so fast on that hill, you could feel your bike vibrating just because of the valve stems.
Wow, dude.
I have kind of can I segue into a crank question? Okay. The last episode you talked with Kent, the famous 192 millimeter arms, the Ashtabulas, and the story. That's one for the books. That was a great one. But I was thinking about something. The modern BMX bikes today have really small, like 25 or 30 gear in the front or something. It's almost like a math problem to me. I was wondering about that. Like, Kent had this ratio where his gear was kind of camouflaged with a 192 arm with a 45 is quite a different animal than a 170 or a 175 with a 45. That would be a nightmare, but 192 made it bearable. So I'm not sure what the equation would be, but someone could probably do it. What would today's equivalent be on a modern BMX bike with the small cog in the front? Like, if you were going to make it equatable to the controversial 192 that Kent rode, I wonder what the gearing would be to be the equivalent of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, Danny, here's what I did. I read in the early days, they used to have these. Like, this is when I was 15 and 16 years old. They used to have these hubs that you had a gear and you had a snap ring. And typically a snap ring rear cog was for like a coaster brake bicycle. But they had freewheels that way too. And you could go to a 14 or a 15 or a 16 or 17. And you didn't have to you didn't have to have a special wrench to crank off that freewheel, which is usually reefed on there. Yeah, you just had this snap ring, and some of those gears were case hardened steel. They were a black gear, and the black ones were really hard. The silver ones were soft. Anyhow, the thing that I did is I ran a 4215, which was just barely easier than a 45. And the whole reason why I did that initially was to kind of have something that was slightly lower than my other competitors. And then plus it was less weight. But in a previous podcast, I had mentioned that having a big rear cog is better than a small one, because the wheel, when you're, I don't know if you've thought about this, Dan, but imagine a chain going around a gear that's really big, like on the back of a dirt bike.
Yeah.
You got a lot more leverage. The chain spends more time turning the wheel and less time trying to pull the axle forward on the rear wheel.
Okay.
So when you have a little teeny gear in back, it's actually a disadvantage. So the trend that I started to see at some other races, I mean, I've seen some of the bikes, I've watched the races, some of the European races, and it looks like they're running a really small front gear. And so probably what we're doing is something like a 14 or a 15, but it's actually a disadvantage. You're better off running like a 16 in back and a 45 or a 46, depending on the track, or maybe a 44.
Was that trend like Olympic regulation or clearance for?
No, there wasn't any regulation, but I thought it was fascinating that what I used to do, which was not ideal, and that was to run a small gear in the back, like a 15. That was not ideal. There's more. In fact, I remember one time, I don't know if you guys ever thought of doing this, but I wanted to have the hardest gear you could put on a BMX bike. And the biggest gear I could find was a 52 for the front. And I remember I was at Bike Factory, and they were digging through their gearbox trying to find the smallest gear they could find for a rear cog. And they came out and they had 13 tooth rear sprocket.
Wow.
So
Did you break it? Did you break it? You
know what? It was really hard to ride. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, it was like starting off. Yeah, but it did not last very long. I did break it because it's pretty thin. I think after a couple of weeks of riding, and it broke.
Yeah,
it just split.
And gear versus Ashtabula. Ashtabula is going to win. I mean, come on, that's
Yeah.
Hey, Kent. Somebody commented on your last video, and they said that they know where one of your 205s are.
It's
wow.
They know the guy commented saying, "I'm almost positive I know where one of Kent's 205s are."
It's possible.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool if you could put those two in contact. That'd be interesting. Wow.
By the way,
too, I wanted him. I used to bug Ken. I was like, "Can I get some?" I would never get those cranks, but I went to flight cranks. The best I was at 185. But go ahead.
I was trying to maintain a very low profile. I didn't want anybody else to look at my bike and think about my cranks. I was trying to keep it kind of under wraps so other people wouldn't start doing it. But I did have a pair of black Ashtabulas that I had my dad chrome plate. And so they said Ashtabula, and they were chrome plated, so that way people wouldn't notice them as much. But of course, after a while, the 3-piece cranks started coming out. Now, of course, the aluminum 3-pieces were already out, but those were for little kids.
The powder.
Yeah, the kiddie stuff. So as soon as Profile and Redline and GT started coming out with cranks for adults, after that you could order almost whatever you wanted.
Sure.
I think the limit was 190s.
Someone just commented that they remember you from Clackamas.
From Clackamas?
Yeah.
Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice, man. Nice.
So
I've told a story where at the NBL War of Stars in '85, I broke my one-piece crank. What was it? Not Tioga.
Tioga?
No. Oh. What was the other? My crank, my one-piece cranks.
Yeah.
My one-piece cranks out of the gate after I hole shotted John Anderson from Redline, and I broke my cranks in half for the 17 over expert, and I went over the bars. So that's my big Takagi 180s.
Takagi, Japanese. Yeah, I remember those.
Don Watson is the guy that says he remembers you. I don't know if you remember Don Watson.
Sounds familiar. What class did he race?
I don't know, Don. What class did you race? If you want to comment, Don. Anyways, dude, nice. I think I wanted, if you don't mind, we could switch it up a little bit, and I want to talk about. I touched a little bit about growing up and jumping and our crew and that type of thing. And I've said this many times before, where we were SC guys before we were anything else. SC, all the
SC was cool.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, SC was a good way to go.
I've been.
Sure.
PK Ripper. Do you guys remember that name? PK Ripper. That was popular where we were at. Redmond, Bellevue, Seattle, Tacoma.
Definitely.
Yep.
I was on the red line most of my time. You know that, Kent. But
yeah,
I like the bigger frame. Yeah.
One of my.
Go ahead.
There was SE. There was PK Ripper. There was another aluminum manufacturer.
Floval Flyer.
Oval Flyer. Yep.
Yeah. Quad Angle.
Well, that was an aluminum, I don't think.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Waiting for Kevin.
Kevin, were you trying to say something? Sorry, we're stepping all over you.
Yeah, we made it to cut you off. Sorry.
I think he's having some internet.
He might be. I think he was going to ask us about our favorite bikes from the 80s, like private made, like an S&M or
right.
Pat, I don't know. I'll have to wait for him to ask. I don't want to interject, but
no, he was
something like our favorite frames. I don't remember.
Well, he did mention that earlier before we got on.
Okay. Go ahead. You go, Kent. Go ahead.
Geometry wise, when people talk geometry, like, hey, this bike has a good geometry, you hear this being thrown around a lot, but what really determines whether or not you have good geometry on your bike is two main primary factors: is the bike long enough? Is it too long, or is it too short for your height? And another important piece of geometry is what is the height of the bottom bracket from the ground? Those are pieces that need to be considered. And then is the geometry such that it can handle the abuse that BMX tends to put on bikes? So those are some things. The other thing is like Hutch bicycles and Torker. Mm-hmm. Both those manufacturers made a little bit shorter rear triangle. That made the front end come up a little better. And some people liked that effect, but I preferred the standard triangle that you would find in a GT or a GHP or a Mongoose or, you name it, all these other different brands. But there were a few manufacturers that had small rear triangles, and I kind of felt like they were a disadvantage. They were great for manualing. It took some getting used to, for sure, especially out of the gate.
I like the longer chainstay back there, like the Ronnie's Elf and the
Patterson.
The yeah, the home and you had a Holmes. What happened to your Holmes? I mean, that's a great frame, man. Was it too big for you, or what happened?
No, well, okay, it actually was a little bit too big for me, and when I got that, it was a Pro XL, so that was probably a little bit, it was definitely, it rode nice. Its geometry was good, but for me, it was a little bit long. But I wanted a strong bike. Chris Bradley had one, so I said, I'll go for it. But you've been to our tracks, Dan. We had 4 sets of 25-foot doubles at the Redmond track, and we had all those that rhythm section that was basically a whole bunch of 15-foot doubles that were steep and deep, and occasionally you come up short. And so I eventually fatigued the front gusset bad enough to where it had kind of a wave in the chrome plate. We've all seen that before. As soon as you got a little bit of wave in that chrome plate, that means you're going to end up breaking that frame right there.
It can't. Was 80 acres? Was that pre-Microsoft campus where they did motocross or not? Where was 80 acres? Over by Group.
That's where it was. Is Microsoft?
I've been there a few times. I just forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was before the Microsoft was built. Yeah.
The Redmond track. Now, whenever we're talking about tracks here, we're talking about people's homemade backyard projects. But the Redmond track was Nike Hill on top of that, what some people refer to as Education Hill. And so we had a track up there. We had two different tracks up there. Both of them eventually ended up getting bulldozed, but for whatever reason, development starts to happen, and they want to.
That was pre-Crossroads, right? That was pre-Crossroads.
That was actually after Crossroads. Crossroads was the first one. Redmond
went to college then. Okay, that's why I forgot that. Okay.
Yeah, then we had another one. Okay. Yeah, it was epic. So I don't know if you, Kevin, heard what we were talking about before, but an early aluminum frame that I thought was cool, but I never ended up getting one, and that was a PK Ripper. Do you remember those? PK Ripper.
You there, Kev?
Kevin is like I was last time, locked up.
Hey, Kent, I think, why don't we wrap it up and then he'll edit. I think he's having some sound issues, but he's going to edit. So we'll wrap right now. We're about an hour anyway.
Are we?
Yeah, because I'm not getting audio, and there'll be more story later. We'll continue a part 3, I think. Okay.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess the that's the last moto.
Yeah, for this one. Okay, brothers. I'll talk to you guys soon. I'm going to X out.
Cool.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. All right.